2022 Glens Zoning Board of Appeals. First order of business this evening.
Here.
We've got someone joining us via Zoom. Dan, can you hear us?
Dan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. First order of business is to approve the May 16th, 2022 minutes as written. Do I have a second on that motion?
I got a card, so that one said no because I'm not state.
Do I have a second on the motion to accept the May 2022 minutes?
Okay,
so
I'll second that.
Second. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. First order of business, Kevin and Colleen Croes, 24 Morgan Avenue. Can you come forward, state your name and address for the record, please?
All the way up, huh?
Right into the microphone.
How's it going? I'm Kevin Cruzy, 24 Morgan Ave, Glens Falls, New York.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your project, Kevin?
The project is just a storage shed, the center of the back property. Under 200 square feet, like I said, it's all budget and what I can find, but I think it's gonna be about 12 by 16. I'm hoping, if not, it's gonna be 10 by 16, if that's all I can afford. But I just wanted to push it back a little bit to the fence to maximize my, the yard in the city. That's all.
Yeah, I actually walked the yard today. I think you took down a pool. There's an existing shed that's right on the property line, or pretty close to it.
Real close.
It looks like it would fit with the character of the neighborhood, in my opinion. But certainly, any questions for Kevin?
I have a couple.
Sure.
They're really simple. First, are you having power to the shed?
There's power that's there for the pool that I took down, so that's,
But it's not power to the shed. The shed is not being powered, or is it being powered?
I could, well, not to the shed, but it would be near the shed.
It's fine.
That's one.
Are you having any plumbing associated with it? And the last one, if you're bringing it closer to your property, how are you draining the roof of the shed? Is it going off to your neighbors or
No, it'd be left and right.
left and right, so on your own property on the 15 feet?
Yep.
That was all I was wondering.
Thank you.
Between you and your neighbors in the back, is there a fence there? Or did
There
you
is,
mention it?
my whole yard's fenced in.
Any additional questions?
That's pretty.
Thank you. Is
Thank
there
you.
anyone here from the community that wants to address this application?
With respect to seeker, I would classify this as a type 2 action if it is the granting of an area variance for a single, two-family, or three-family residence. Therefore, no further action is required.
I would like to make a motion that the Glens Falls Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the application for area variance for the project named Kevin and Colleen Croes, owners of tax map number 303.13-23-27, commonly known as 24 Morgan Avenue. The request is for a setback of 5 feet, so granting 5 feet of relief from the 10-foot setback. I do not believe this will create an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. It actually fits very well with the surrounding houses. This benefit really couldn't be achieved. It would take up a substantial portion of this yard to move the shed forward. While it's 50%, it does not appear to be substantial when looking at the project. This proposed variance will not have any adverse impact on physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood. And while this may be created by placing the shed within the setback, it really shouldn't preclude the variance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Anton. All those in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Dan. Glad to hear you can hear us. Motion carries, variance is granted.
It's very low.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Next up is James Capitano, owner of tax map 302.15-5-1, commonly known as 24 Kensington Road. Please step forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is James Capitano, 24 Kensington Road.
Can you tell us a little about your project?
Yep, just wanted to build a fence around the backyard property to contain my 2 kids and large dog. That's the gist of it.
And you're on a corner lot, right? with-
Technically, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And where are you placing this on the property line? Are you a foot back or?
Foot back from the sidewalk and approximately 3 or 4 feet from the neighbor's property line on either side. And the fence itself will be it's not a privacy fence, so it's not like a wall or something you can't see through.
Right.
It's about 4 feet. I'm not sure if I'm going to be 5 foot or 4'6". I'm going for 5 foot just in case, but it'd be black aluminum. There's several houses in the neighborhood back in the Broadacres area that have almost the exact style fence.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, I would just like to guarantee that it is going to be that setback from the sidewalk there. It is
Yeah.
a tight, someone pushed a stroller through there.
Yeah, I'll probably go back 18 inches just to be safe. Yeah.
Perfect. My one question was if anyone had measured this, it is, I just did it on my phone, very close to that 500 feet of the town line.
Oh, because
Which
of
is
Queensbury, right?
Roseville,
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't be positive that it doesn't need to be referred from looking at my phone.
When you submitted your application to the building department, did they talk to you about whether it was within 500 feet?
Yeah, Chris was there at the time, and he said he didn't think, he said it was close, but he thought it was enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's my feeling as well. I just want to make sure. It's definitely, it looks like we probably 600 feet.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Any additional questions? All right, James, thank you. We'll see you.
All right, thank you.
Anybody here from the community wish to speak on this application?
Seeker, with respect to seeker, again, this is a type 2 action as it is the granting of an area variance for a single family, 2-family, or 3-family residence. Therefore, no further action is required by the board.
I'd like to make a motion that the Glens Falls Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the application for an area variance for the project identified as James Capitano, owner of tax map 302.15-5-1, commonly known as 24 Kensington Road. Granting the variances from a 3-foot requirement up to a 5-foot fence to be a see-through non-privacy fence. This does not appear to create an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. There really isn't another means for this applicant to do this while keeping his dog in. The area variance does not appear to be substantial, and there will not be any adverse impact to the physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood. And while this is self-created by selecting a larger fence, again, there really isn't a means to contain the rather large dog mentioned without a larger fence. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up, Spring City Development Group LLC, under tax map 302.20-1-27, commonly known as 2533 South Street. Could you please state your name and relationship to the applicant?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Amy Carrillo. I am counsel for Spring City Development, and here on behalf of the project at the corner of Elm and South Street. Springs Redevelopment was the successful RFP respondent to, or RFI respondent to the city's redevelopment ideas to make use of the DRI funding that was issued by the state of New York. I see that Jeff, I think, is just trying to figure out my presentation. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so to continue with scheduled programming, I'm sorry about that. So again, I'm Lily Carino here on behalf of the applicants for the City Development Group. We are here tonight to discuss the overall development of this site of the city right now, which is at the intersection of South and Elm. Right now, it contains the Pavilion Building and 3 buildings. And I know that my pointer does not work. Oh, there it is working tonight. This building, this one, and this one, these 2 have been demolished, but these 3 buildings are all part of this red redevelopment square in the city. So a little bit of history for the project at South Street is DRI initiative funds were awarded to South Street for a mixed-use initiative in the amount of $1.2 million. In May of 2021, the city selected Finaccio Springs Development as a developer for the DRI. Over the course of months that followed that, a development agreement was executed for the project that really represents that the project elements that were designed for purposes of the award are actually going to come to fruition based upon Spring City's plans, and that's the agreement with the city to do that. We commenced our application period with the filing of IDA benefits and land acquisition from the LDC. We also have submitted for site plan review. We had our first meeting with the planning board on July 5th, and interspersed with that was our zoning application here, because what we have is really what we call 2 phases. They are sequential phases because the first phase is essentially a rehabilitation of lighted buildings, and the second phase is the erection of new buildings. Now, those things are really dividing lines for us as opposed to the boards of the city, but it helps orient the fact that 36 Elm, 49 South, 45 South, and 41 South are all part of phase 1, all of which are zoning compliant, all of which will be done as part of the redevelopment of those buildings into mixed use. So we'll just go through those quickly. So 36 Elm, known as the Incubator Building, is about 16,000 square feet. It is a 3-story steel and timber frame structure that is going to have commercial on the ground floor, and we are working with the city of Glens Falls for that community space, and then having apartments up above. 41 South, which is known as the former Sandy's Clam Bar building, same type of concept. There will be a restaurant or retail use on the main floor, as well as apartments up above. 45 South Street is the Hot Shots building, and again, it will contain both of these square footages, but about 1,600 square feet of commercial space on the main floor and apartments up above. And 45 South Street, which is recently demolished and is now vacant, is going to serve as outdoor patio or extension space of 45 South. And so what you can see here is the overall neighborhood rendering that's going to also contain 25 to 33 South Street, which is why we're here. We call this phase 2, even though the sequence is really kind of, it's all happening at once. We're all doing this at one time. And you can see that this is the lion's share of the new structure on the site at 25 South Street. So here's what the block looks like. I showed it to you before in the red box, but here's what it will look like once redeveloped. In the foreground, you can see that that's the new city space. We have not placed the new pavilion on the site, as I know the city is currently in discussions with its architect, but that would be the location. And the attempt here is, this is the pavilion space, the overhang space that was 41 South. And you can see that it's going to function as this flow space into this building here and this building here, as well as a walkthrough and pedestrian access. So you notice the new urbanism elements here of mid-block connectors and attempting to, rather than corner off the blocks, allow for pedestrian walkthroughs. Here, this building again is a rehabilitated building, and this central column connects the two apartment buildings, one which will have ground floor commercial and the other does not, which is why we are here. And just wanted to give the board the opportunity to kind of see the mass and scaling of the project and what it will look like. There's been such tremendous work in Glens Falls on Ridge Street and Glen and upper parts of South. So this is really the last corridor to bring the vision of the revitalized downtown Glens Falls down the South Street corridor. But the part that makes this, I think, particularly unique and why we're here is that South Street, while it's a commercial corridor, begins to step back to mixed use and residential as you move down Elm Street. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is those things in our experience that make commercial development more challenging. And there's some elements about the way that this site is set up that will make it necessarily more challenging. In fact, likely impossible to do. So these are some of the pictures, and I wanted to pay attention particularly to this one. Because the lot is so large, it's all in one zoning district, but you can see that the inner courtyard of this building is going to be residential with a playground and common space, grills and outdoor areas, as well as the parking lot for the residents. You can see the pull-through. So it is segregated a little bit from this busy commercial sector for all kinds of privacy reasons. So just move through some of the renderings to get to the elevations. And here you can see that the ground floor design of the buildings are all slightly different. These are what we call the flats. So those are first floor apartments. And you can see here uniquely there are, that's the commercial, we move to the next slide, excuse me. Here you can see the double doors for the two-story walk-up townhouses, more like the brownstone design that you would see in New York City. So a mix of design elements. So the relief that we're requesting tonight is actually from 2019 zoning code that has a restriction on mixed-use composition of its buildings for first-floor residential. We seek a variance of 4,166 square feet. That's a little bit different than the application because I received confirmation from the architects this morning. They calculated some of the common space. This is actually the number that they're arriving at. And we're asking for that out of a total ground floor of these phase 2 buildings of 12,523 total square feet on the ground floor. But it should be noted that the overall project contains 20,866 square feet of first floor space. So very, very large two-block redevelopment. And so what we're asking for is that the board look at this as it was released as part of the RFI or as a response to the DRI, which is a total block revitalization as opposed to a single lot, because it is being brought to the planning board and to the city to be reviewed in its totality. So the 5-part area variance test that I wanted to go through tonight was whether there's an undesirable change in the neighborhood, whether the benefit could be sought by some alternative feasible method, whether the variance is substantial, whether there will be an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood, and whether the difficulty was self-created. That 5-part test comes from New York state law and is oftentimes codified in the local zoning code, and it is here as well. So here is what we call phase 2, but the total ground floor square footage is 12,523, as I mentioned. You will see that the commercial use is highlighted in red, bright red. And part of what's being asked for is on the back side, not the front side facing South Street, but the back side that circulates in the inner private courtyard of the apartment building would in fact be townhomes. So 2-floor, those nice side-by-side entry doorways with a main living room and the apartment, or the sleeping quarters up above. And that will also be mirrored on the Elm Street side as you push back into some of those residential areas, I'll show you in a minute. That dark yellow hue is the 2-floor townhomes. Again, the interior courtyard on the back side of the building, that light yellow, is the flats area. But again, that being done to create privacy for the playground and the grill out areas and those types of things, where we're orienting the commercial uses to the South Street side where they'd most be common. As you look at the overall multi-block overview, you can see what we're trying to do here, which is, if it's highlighted in red, it is commercial ground floor. So this block itself has a lot of commercial square footage. And you can see that as we move down the block towards the other residential neighbors or the mixed-use neighbors, as well as the interior courtyard, is where we're trying to balance the uses with what's most appropriate and what we think the residents would be most appreciative of. And I brought this because this is the current parcel character. So I asked our landscape architects and designers to take a look at an aerial view, and what you can see in blue is the same cutout. So this is the parcel that the 5 buildings and the 3 lots that are being redeveloped, actually more than that. And inside of the overall context and flavor of the neighborhood, you can see that in commercial intensive on Glens South. And then you can see as it steps back to mixed use in yellow, and then back again to green residential. And that's pretty common with urban design, is that you concentrate commercial use in your commercial corridors, and then you step uses down as you move out. And you can see that Glens Falls is doing that. What would it look like if this board were to grant this relief is this. So it really does, I don't know if you can see when I change the square, so if I feel like I'm, on Sesame Street, pay attention to the blue square, it changes. So it's in there. And you can see that we really did pull that red on the South Street side and then try to mix the mixed use back to where it belongs. So this would be the new character, but highly consistent with the overall land use in the zone, multiple zones actually. And then what would that look like on these renderings? So if it's highlighted in yellow, it's residential use, it's interior courtyard focus, as I said. And as you turn and you come, this is looking up Elm Street to the commercial area, you can see those lined street trees, that nice break of townhome uses, very much like a New York City or a Boston kind of flavor. But then you can see that the commercial uses will face the new pavilion, that there will be an in and out flow of commercial traffic, hopefully patronizing all of these businesses and restaurants from this new civic space or community space. And again, of course, everything facing South Street has that red commercial intensive where it belongs. So one of the things I also wanted to bring was our commercial rental data. We looked a lot at this in planning, and one of the things that's evident is that there's over 100,000 square feet right now of vacant commercial space locally. So choosing how much commercial space you have is critically important at this point, and nearly 40% 11,000 square feet is located at or adjacent to the project site. I also happen to know the developers of 14 Hudson and the current management agents. And the space at 14 Hudson is about 8,000 square feet, has been vacant since its approval and construction in 2018. And that's due to a couple of things. One is the rising fit-up costs, which are about $50 to $75 a square foot. And the current local rental rate is $15 per square foot. So there's a serious mismatch between what people in the Glens Falls market want to pay and should pay, and just the nature of inflation and the rising cost of building at this time. So the last thing that we want to do is create a project that we know, based upon existing data, we do not think can be built successfully. In the course of the last 4 years, that vacant space at 14 Hudson translates to a loss of over $500,000. So it's a sizable sum of money. The other aspect is location. And I want to come back to this for a minute, and I want you to think about commercial landlords. Commercial landlords, particularly in retail, won't go into office space because that's in a whole different column these days, but retail and restaurant spaces, they want foot traffic. They want to be able to have people who would otherwise not see them or are not familiar with them to stop in and become a patron. These interior-facing facades of the building will not lend themselves to that, which will create an additional challenge of being able to attract the landlord at a price point necessary for that type of use. So these are the types of things, and as you look at, you go up Elm, the same, it's outside the commercial walkability, it's moving down toward parking lots, residential and mixed-use areas. It will be even tougher to fill, and I wanted to sort of make the board aware that this project has, as I mentioned a moment ago, already has its work cut out for it, filling about 11,000, almost 12,000 square feet of first floor commercial. So this is not a request for an all residential project. This is a request for a portion of it that really does make sense for purposes of the market and frankly what people will lease out. So I thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions and move to any slide that you think would be helpful. So thank you.
Questions?
Well, first I'd just like to say I think it was a very good presentation, and you made your case. I'm the only position that I have concerns with personally is going up on Elm and the townhomes there. I totally understand the internal aspect where you're having the townhomes and the residential facing the parking lot, and I understand the challenge of bringing traffic back into there. It's going to be a bit of a conflict of traffic into that parking lot, which I don't know if it's dedicated for that only.
Yeah.
If that parking lot is dedicated only to commercial, and then you're eliminating the commercial, you're creating kind of an island in that parking lot. Like who would use it?
Right, it's not exclusively for commercial,
Okay.
it's definitely for the residences as well. And there's also these 3 new parking spaces, which, believe it or not, have been designed because of the advent of DoorDash and delivery services and all the types of things that are really cutting down on vehicular traffic and parking. And those 3 spots will be dedicated to drop off for the residents, people who want their groceries delivered and who need delivery from Target or Hannaford or any of those things. So there will be in and out traffic that both serve. It's hard to say whether that's commercial or residential in nature. That's more of a mix, I would think, supporting commercial business, but it's for the benefit of residences.
Yeah, so for me, the residential on the interior side, I understand and can get on board with that. I'm not as on board with the townhomes going on Elm, only because I feel like I understand the diagram, it makes sense, I get it. I'm just saying, this is the linchpin between the commercial district. And for me, that Elm Street aspect, I would prefer that to be, I don't think it has to be a holistic yay or nay. I mean, we can have back and forth with this. It is very important for you guys as well as for the city, I think it's gonna have a very big impact. You know, you're gonna be creating a significant amount. How many people are there in this proposed residential right now?
69 units.
69 units?
Mhm.
Okay, so, and
Sorry.
how many are there, two-bedroom primarily?
1 and 2 bedroom, right? The townhomes are larger, the flats are 1 bedrooms, and then up above is a mix. And they will be predominantly workforce housing, so created for a price point that is commensurate with the workforce of the area. And part of that really does speak to why we think, again, I take your point, but why we think the Elm Street is particularly challenging to fill for a commercial, because it is off the main block. It will be at even a lower price point. It'd be very hard to make it. It'd be very hard to keep the apartments affordable based upon just the economics of the project. And one of the goals is to have the project units be affordable. And the more time you spend trying to fill a commercial space with units that could have gone to residents and workforce housing, the harder it gets. That's the point we're trying to make. It's not that we don't think the project supports any commercial. It's just that we know that this one area right here is where it starts to get tough.
The next building down on Elm is that multifamily. right?
Correct.
Blue, yeah.
Yep. You can see it begins to step down. We left this, if it was a parking lot that serves the commercial backside of Glens Street, we left it as mixed, but as you move down Elm, there is not a single other commercial building. And that's just, as developers, that's what we're looking at. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it flows from CCD to GC1, which does allow for multifamily, and then goes into residential. So I think it does taper nicely.
It is curious to me that if this wasn't the city block, whether it would have already been subdivided and bisected zone-wise, but because it is an existing city lot and is exempt from zoning, I don't think it was considered. But if this argument was being made in front of a comprehensive plan, this is how that argument would be made, I think. I think it's just the nature of where we find ourselves right now, that it's known this way, because it's a very large lot that connects 2 blocks.
I gotta say, I think it's completely appropriate to transition. I do believe it would be entirely appropriate to begin transitioning residential property at that point, given the nature of Elm Street and also the proximity of where that mixed use does begin. I can't tell you, how many conversations have been had about developing commercial space along that little pocket right there, including South Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a tremendous compromise to bridge the gap and see something finally come to fruition in a way that's not going to be intrusive. It's not going to be invasive. It's not as if we're putting residential apartments in downtown on Glens Street. This is Elm Street, and currently there are blighted buildings before the city took ownership of them in a parking lot, and I think this is a welcome upgrade.
I would also say, to that point, that by putting the townhomes on that side versus the other way, creates a little bit of a sharper border, which then is kind of architecturally what we're trying to create, right, with a densification, regardless of the use, and obviously we're concerned with the use on this board, but from an architectural standpoint, how
Yes.
dense is the feel of it, and I think that's being created by a delineated rhythm of townhomes versus just, single family homes.
There's no doubt that the townhome on Elm was done to create more of that downtown urban feeling than maybe an apartment complex has that feeling. These Elm Street facing under the awnings with the double doors, with the walk-up look of New York City, really meant to look like an urban design residential living.
I guess I'd just carry through Matt's point. I agree with the proposal as far as the deviation and allocation of the residential use, especially at the Elm Street side and whole townhouse side. A lot of this presentation, very well prepared. However, it's at kind of the 30,000 foot level. So if we were to look at the details of this, and specifically the town home style on High Street, it is architecturally different as far as that appearance, and you are walking up an elevation to get to the front door. Is that the idea?
There will be, I'm not sure if it's a step up or not. I'm sorry that Scott's not here. I
It
don't
looks like
actually
in
think
the
so.
elevation view, it is.
It is, okay.
So conversely with that, I guess on the apartment side, is that graded?
It's that grade, definitely. I can see it there. Because again, you enter through the inner court, you're going to enter through the central column and down the main hallway. Whereas the townhomes are actually exterior entrances, which you don't often see in apartment living. So they will have their own entrances.
And when you use the term townhome, this is still an apartment?
It is. But townhome in the sense of not the legal term townhome, I take your point, but more so in the style of what it would be architecturally. No, it will not be the legal townhome as that is defined, correct.
So just getting back to the details of this, in my tenure on the board, we've had one condition of residential use in the zoning district which was approved. It was a similar application in that it was a walk-up to a different elevation than at the ground level. As part of that process or that discussion, we did have certain conditions on the treatment at the facade as far as what a home or what a renter or homeowner, not homeowner, but what a rental person would be able to say, hang in the windows, window coverings.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I'm just bringing that out for consistency.
If I can show you. But it does, it has a beautiful awning and all the street trees, as you can see. But I think what you mean is from the inside out, what is displayed.
Right,
from
is somebody going to hang a Bob Marley poster in the front window?
The answer is probably yes, and then we have to tell them no. But no, but I take your point. So maybe perhaps aesthetic restrictions about what can be displayed in the main windows on Elm Street. Okay, I think that would be fun. And please, just for our own clarity, whether that would extend to the second floor as well. Just whether you want it above the awning or just below, because I think the unit owner, the unit renter would have both floors. Just give that some thought.
Can we see the perspective looking up on where that would show that?
No, maybe not this way.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Oh, up Elm? I'm sorry, I think that's up Elm. You want me to go back?
No, that's Elm, right. Am I right? That's Elm.
That's Elm, right to South Street. Yep.
We're looking down on the tree line street right there.
Yep.
Right. So all the, like to your point, Tim, all of the townhomes are directly off of grade. They're not going up to get to that, correct?
Right.
Right.
This part right
There's not
here
a
in
lower
tunnels,
level.
right?
Like most townhomes have an elevated, like split. It's almost like a split level.
Yeah.
Where
There'll be no below grade.
Right.
No. And then, so these
and there's no
four.
awnings or anything like that, right?
And then there's the central column, and there's that gap for pedestrian mid-block connection, and then it moves right into commercial. So that corner of Elm will still have commercial use, as will these buildings as well. It's just this piece right here.
And there's no, I mean, I know this isn't really us, but there's no on-street parking there in that sense. So all the parking that would be relegated to that would be interior, right?
We don't have any on-street parking allocated for the project.
So to me, I think it's creating, like I said, a dense edge. There's a walkable corridor that we're maintaining, if not further defining.
My sense of just doing this for 2 decades is you're probably going to end up, I think, at some point with Elm Street being able to be blocked off for community events and leaving the garage access open. And this is going to be, a highly mixed population, community, open space, walkable space. So, I mean, it's not up to me. The city gets to decide what to do with its streets, but it's sort of naturally tailor-made for that.
I just have a few more questions. So on the interior side of the apartment facade, with the ground floor. Those doorways are entering, you said, common areas, so it's not entering individual.
That's right. So if you came into the playground with your children, right, you enter in through this common door, this is an atrium all the way up, and you would take a central walkway down to your apartment door. Mhm.
So there's not individual units that have doorways that border access on that back.
Correct. Those would be central access hallway.
And as far as uses within all these buildings, it's limited to commercial and residential only? There's
Commercial and
no
residential.
office?
No office planned at this time. We actually have a sense of who our tenants, we're in active negotiations with our tenants, and it's not office space.
I think in the Zoom generation, all residences are offices.
Yeah, that's,
I would just say, given the bulk of this project and what we're seeing now in the market and what's actually realistic for commercial space in mixed-use buildings, I think this request makes sense.
One last question. So the common areas that are adjacent to South Street, what are the uses in the common areas?
they are interior circulation and common only. They are going to be likely mail receptacles, drop-off locations for Amazon, things that support the residential life. That's what the common spaces are intended to support.
So it's not like a rec room or anything that would have?
Not that I've seen on the plans yet that it's a rec room, but I'm sure that there is, like, there will be gathering spaces and a couch to sit on while someone waits for someone to come out, that kind of thing, yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anybody here from the community that would like to comment on this? If so, please state your name and affiliation.
Hello, my name is Jeff Flagg, my affiliation. I'm the Economic Development Director for the city. I just want to mention that, as you probably know, the city has been working with Minaccio and Spring City Development for just over a year, I think. We submitted an RFQ that they responded to, I think, last spring. And, one of the things that's become clear to me, as the Economic Development Director, is the critical need for housing as we're going forward. Obviously, I'm hopeful that this project, among several other projects that have already happened on South Street, will sort of catalyze more development. Many people who come by have mentioned to me, when they look at the other side of South Street, well, what are you going to do about that? Well, as you can imagine, we're working with developers to try and find ways to sort of assist them within the confines of what we're able to sort of create this very vibrant sort of commercial corridor on South Street that sort of plays off of Glens Street. That said, one of the things we're also recognizing is, especially in a space-constrained community like Glens Falls, that you can't really grow too many places, right? So one of the things that we encouraged Minaccio to do from the very beginning was to sort of maximize the use of the space. For those of you who followed the DRI since it was first initiated back in 2017, the whole site we're looking where this new building was going to be a parking garage. So although we are looking for ways to sort of address potential parking issues as we do develop downtown, we've also realized that we want to make this as walkable a space as possible. Right? The city, as Louis had mentioned, is working with an architecture firm, Envision Architects, to develop the market center on the other side of the incubator building. We're hoping that will become sort of a flow-through space. So the idea for this whole block really to be as walkable as possible. One of the other challenges we have, as I'm sure you can imagine, is, and I would have been frustrated by in my relatively short time as an economic development director, is the limited kinds of living experience you can have in Glens Falls, right? Most of what you have is detached homes and apartments, relatively small apartments, usually on upper floors. One of the things we're trying to do here is sort of encouraging different kinds of living examples. I think townhomes or ground floor. Obviously, I don't want commercial spaces. The city would be violently opposed, I think, if we were looking at something on South Street or on Glen Street. But I think the transitional nature of this sort of lends itself. And, we're hopeful that this will catalyze some other investment. As somebody mentioned, even further down the street, there's several blighted buildings that are going in all directions, really, when you go from this corner, with the exception of going back up South Street. So with that said, the city, two members now, through the DRI working group, that Mayor Hall set up, and also now Mayor Collins, are strongly supportive of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. Is there anybody else in the community that'd like to comment on this application? Are there any final questions from the board? In regard to seeking?
With respect to seeker, what you need to acknowledge is that the planning board has accepted lead agency for coordinated review. Therefore, this is an unlisted action, we will be reviewing part 2, but your negative declaration is for the area variance only, you are not accepting lead agency. So reviewing part 2, number 1, will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulation? No. Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land? No. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
No.
No. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? No. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in existing level of traffic or affecting existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? No. Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? No. Will the proposed action impact existing public or private water supplies? No. Will it impact public-private wastewater treatment utilities? No. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? No. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources such as wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, or fauna? No. Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? No. Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? No. Given that, the board needs to make a motion for acknowledging that planning board has accepted lead agency for coordinated review and that this area variance is an unlisted action. You have reviewed the short form part 2 and answered no to all questions 1 through 11 and could issue a negative declaration for the area variance only. Want to say so moved?
Yeah, so moved by council. Make a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Now it's.
No, that's here. So now you need to move to your motion for the area variance.
I'd like to make a motion that the Spring City Development Group LLC, appearing before the zoning board of appeals this evening, hereby grant the application for area variance identified as Spring City Development Group LLC, owner of tax map 302.20-1-27, commonly known as 2533 South Street. We're granting a variance for the allowable commercial usage first floor of 4,432 square feet to be used for residential purposes. This will not create an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. It actually blends in as it tapers into a residential area starting from Elm Street back. There is no other way for the applicant to achieve this build out without doing this. And looking at the total square footage of the project, this does not appear to be a substantial request for an area variance. It will not have an inverse impact on the physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood. In fact, This area has been blighted for quite some time, so this will be a marked improvement in the characteristic of our downtown commercial corridor. And whether this is self-created, there really isn't another feasible way, as stated by the applicant, to move forward with this project. So for those reasons, I make the motion to support this variance. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner McDonald. Roll call vote. Anton? Dan? Is that an aye?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the July 18th Munstall Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for this evening. Second? All those in favor, aye? Thank you for your time this evening.
Aye.